We're coming on to our last panel, and I will be your moderator for that. And so I am going to ask my panelists. So the topic of the panel is developing an enterprise NaaS strategy. It's a good time to sort of summarize a lot of the key points that we've been hearing over the last couple of days. So I'd like to call my panel to the stage, please. Steve Thomas is Senior Industry Director at Frost & Sullivan. Steve? Benjamin Vigouroux is Vice President of Digital Infrastructure at Orange Business. Neal Secher is Vice President and Head of Network Services at TD Bank. And Raleigh Mann, Senior Vice President of Technologies at Williams-Sonoma. Welcome. Have a seat. So I'm really pleased with the makeup of this panel. I have to say, it's we've seen Raleigh and Neal. We've heard you talk earlier today, but I love about
that's why some people already left. They're like, we've heard them.
That's right, because you said it all before. Is that it? But I love the fact that we have an industry analyst, we have a service provider, a carrier with us as well, because it really helps to have a more complete picture, and we can have some dynamic discussions. So I guess one of the things I've noticed about the discussions in the last couple of days is that NaaS means different things to different people. And we've heard that in the last panel as well. Nobody was really quite sure what it was. I personally look a lot at the campus NaaS. That's almost a completely different thing. And so I would like to maybe kick off the discussion talking to an expert on the topic, because I know, Steve, you've been looking at this for a long time. You were in enterprise before as well, so you have a long history in enterprise IT. So what is NaaS? How should we be thinking about that? And what should enterprises be looking for when they're looking at a NaaS offer?
Yeah, so NaaS is really the as-a-service model. Is really just a way to buy, sell, and consume networks. I mean, it's nothing more complex than that. The different point of views comes from the fact that the equipment providers will say they offer NaaS, which means it's a subscription, and they might cover maintenance, and that's it, right? Then you have the data centers where they can, we can do automated LAN-to-LAN, in Cisco terms, ACI fabric, connectivity. And then the service providers coming in, and they're saying that we can offer all of this, pay as you grow services. We can manage everything and that type of thing. So it really just boils down to the fact that it's just a way to consume networks. I think it's a model that people will choose to use. I mean, some people will still use the old CapEx model. That's not really NaaS. People will still do it yourself. But I think in terms of the service providers and the community around that, they want it to be an easier to use, consumable, and services that people can get things provisioned in a matter of minutes rather than months.
So I've heard people say it's not a technology, it's a consumption model. Then I heard someone say, no, it's more than a consumption model. Would you agree then it's mainly a consumption model? Is that it? Or would you say, is there more behind it? Is there a technology angle behind that as well?
Well, I think for the service providers, it's a go-to-market strategy in their regard to offer a portal, service, an API integration that allows allows networks to be as easy to use as the cloud, and that's the goal. I mean, there's a lot more components than just virtualizing a server. There's a lot of moving pieces, and it's very distributed. You're not just going to one location. So there's the challenges around automating things that are so dynamic, but making use of virtual services and shared services models, I think, is the go-to-market strategy for the carriers, and it should be more cost-effective for them. So it's a way for them to also increase margins where it's been challenging in the past.
Okay. So Benjamin, it seems like a good time to bring you in on the discussion as a carrier. Would you agree with that definition? Is it something else, or would you add to it? How do you feel about like what NaaS is and what enterprises should be looking for?
Yeah, I do agree with Steve. Maybe I could bring some customer use cases here. We have different customer use cases per industry and per area, but conscious of time, I could share two. The first one is a customer in the USA in the retail business, and they wanted to modernize their network and security architecture to reduce the cost. And they are consuming SASE and SD-WAN services on our platform. And thanks to this, they have been able to perform their data center exit. So they are removing the hardware, security, and networking devices. So first thing. Second thing, and that's the key point, they have been able to do the chaining between the two services and go to the next level in terms of automation. So now they are forecasting to save 15% of network and security costs compared to the previous situation. And the second customer is one in Europe into the manufacturing business. And they are leveraging cloud networking services from our platform to implement a consistent network and security policy over different cloud providers and over the different regions. But the key point is the following. Before moving to a platform business and to NaaS, each time that customer wanted to make a network change, they ended up making two network changes. One on the cloud overlay by the cloud team, and another one on the SD-WAN overlay by the infrastructure team. And now those days are gone. One network change means only one network change because they have been able to do the chaining again between the services. They are reducing the friction and they are reducing their cost. So this is where our customer in 2024.
Okay, so and this retailer you're talking about, so they're 100% in the cloud. Is that what you're saying? They took this opportunity to put everything in the cloud.
Yeah, that's it. And the blocking point was the network and security to perform the data center exit. Yeah. So that's why they needed NaaS to do this.
That's very interesting. And it seems like a good time to bring our enterprises in here, you know. So Neal, Raleigh, you're running very complex networks. There's all sorts of real life issues. I would, maybe Neal, you could start and just tell me, what are your challenges? Does this sound like something that's realistic for you? You know, or are there elements that could help you with your challenges? Explain to me a little bit like your biggest challenges that you're facing.
Yeah, sure. So, and I would also just like preface that I am not all enterprises, right? So I can give you my perspective from this enterprise, but I think there's folks up and down that would have different, you know, different journeys. I mean, for us, you know, like what you described is more of a modernization strategy. So I need to recycle my stuff, or I life cycle my kit, and so I move to a better platform that has more capabilities. I can do that two ways. I can consume it from a provider like you're talking about in a NaaS model, or I can do it myself. And really the only thing that's different is whether I'm depreciating an asset that I own or I'm leasing it effectively. And so it really does come back to this being a commercial conversation, because I can get that same kit either way. The only maybe other thing or wrinkle that we think about a lot when we design a network, particularly for like our retail locations, would be resiliency. And so, you know, having the ability to have multiple carriers under the hood is a very big benefit to us. And you know, as a Canadian bank, we saw a very large carrier in Canada completely lose their entire network, wireline, wireless, internet, the whole thing. I didn't need to learn about resiliency before that moment to know that's not a good thing to happen. And so it could be some you know, major impacting event like that. It could be a strike. We've seen that happen at carriers as well. I mean, there's lots of things that are beyond just the wires in the street of why you might want to diversify and hold on to some of that control in-house. That, not to say that I don't want all the automation and all those things. That's there too, but just providing some other considerations.
Yeah, so I'm a Canadian. I remember that day that the carrier went down. It affected us all. I'm also a customer, by the way, so I'm hoping if this goes well, I'll get a reduction on my fees.
Oh, I can't help you with that, sorry.
So Raleigh, can I bring you into this? How, like, for you and your real life challenges, you run a lot of retail operations as well as other, you know, parts of the business. Is NaaS a reality, or where does it have to go for it to look attractive to you?
Sure. First off, I do consume a NaaS. Technically, I have a largely in my retail branches, we have a network provided by a managed service provider who brings the connectivity, brings the router, brings the the software, the controls. We do have some co-management on the policy side, of course. So NaaS done well is a collection of technology pieces, but stitched together with really good tool chaining and coupling, and it is a single service, right? Single bill, single order experience. It's wonderful. Done poorly, it's loosely coupled things that I can buy from a single place, get support in theory from a single place. The theory doesn't always pan out. And otherwise, it's just a loose collection of technology that is in a place, but I wouldn't really call it a service, right? It's services. So coming to the panel's topic, right? For me, developing a strategy, first, what are my goals? Because you develop a strategy or strategies to deliver you towards a goal. Neal said something very important, and that is, if your business is dynamic and you're going to see a lot of change, if you have to pivot quite a bit, we launch and do a lot of internal application development. I'm updating security policies 3 days a week, right? And I'm pushing that change into different areas of my business that may or may not, those changes may not affect it globally, but I have to make those changes accessible to the users, the administrators in different parts of the business. If I'm going to see a lot of churn, I probably don't want to go through a service provider and have to open a ticket and wait for a multi-day SLA to get those changes. But if they offer a portal where I can self-serve, I'm going to more likely be inclined to consider that, buy that service.
That's a really good point. And it reminded me of another point that you said earlier today, Neal, about not being abstracted, or I think you used the word
intermediate.
Intermediate. That's right. Say that again.
Intermediated.
Intermediated, right?
I
was going to say intermediated from the hardware, from the vendor, right? So does that mean that you'll never do a NaaS service, or are there variants, are there ways, like, tell me about like this strategy of wanting to put your hands on the hardware yourself, those hands on the equipment, how that influences the way you're going to use NaaS?
Oh, that's me, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually do. I would say I actually didn't quite realize it until the panel before that I actually do consume something like a NaaS service, and I think it's just a matter of, and what we were talking a little bit about on the panel this morning was modularity and choice. And so there are ways, I'll give it for example. So for backup. We do cellular backup in all of our branch locations in 2 different countries. And so to do that, that is something that's very difficult for us to do ourselves. We don't, it's a lot of surveying, it's a lot of figuring, and I want to be able to use whatever SIM or whatever carrier is strongest in that particular location of that branch. I don't have the same issues, as cited before, with kind of those dead spots, but there's still a better one than others, and I want failover and things like that. That just, I can still maintain the routing control behind that, and then leverage that, send traffic to that service and know it will be up. That's an example of something where I would make that choice, as opposed to, because I can still own enough of that control. On the back end of that, though, what our businesses might be very concerned about is if we are, it turns commercial, right? If you are sending lots of traffic to cellular, depending on how your rate plans are, they want to know, hey, there were a bunch of service outages in a region. Are my bills going to go up this month? And they clearly want the service, but they also want to know, as far ahead of time as possible, can I keep my costs in line, and how do I plan for that? And so you need to pull lots of information out of that kind of service as well. I think to Raleigh's point, like you have to have those portals right, and you have to have those things right. So, I think that modular nature and picking and choosing is kind of the art of the enterprise a little bit.
The flexibility, depending on how, what's important and where you're going, and you're critical.
Having had a managed NOC send an American SIM to Canada, for 6 weeks of outage. A surprise bill of $250,000 is not what you want to see for roaming data.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. I'm just saying it could have happened. I mean, the bill happened. We didn't have to pay it, but.
You talked your way out of that one?
Yes.
Wow. Nice, nice.
That's where having a good service provider and partner really helps.
Yeah.
So Steve, I wanted to, something struck me from the last panel. So we saw some stats over who's looking at NaaS, who's using NaaS, and I think the stat was 8% of enterprises surveyed were actually using NaaS. So do you think that it's going to stay that low? Is it going to increase? Are we going to see higher adoption, or what would it take to go to higher adoption?
Yeah, I think the adoption is pretty low still, because there is the fact that the carriers, there's a lot of people out there that still want their Excel spreadsheet of quotes, and they want to call somebody to pick, I can't believe people still want Excel spreadsheets of quotes. There's still people out there that just want to call up their account rep and have him do everything for them.
Right.
But so the adoption is not as prevalent as it should be, but I think the industry needs to advertise better about the collaboration of the platform and the ease of use and the visibility, and then to get into things like Raleigh was talking about, the wireless. I mean, if you're with a provider, they have wireless, fixed, and SD-WAN, and they're providing a portal where you can manage that. You can see all the story, and trying to get and talking to the enterprise about how you can utilize the services from the service provider, to understand how you're using networks, and all the service providers are basically MSPs now. They're willing to do last miles from out of network areas and build it into that platform, and I think there's still a lot of network and telecom managers and teams out there that still just want to kind of consume it, where they just pick and choose this and that. So I think it's the encouragement of trying to get in front of them, and I think it was the gentleman from Orcrest, how they said that how they were getting more adoption. Just keep funneling to the portal and say, stop talking to the salespeople, go straight to the portal, and then we'll have you talk to a salesperson, after we get a few more things to discuss, discussed or done. So it's going to still take some time.
But you think that they will go higher? Like, it'll take time.
Yeah,
we clearly have a definition issue. We have
joining people where they are. Where they're talking about the customer journeys. Some of them are, there's still a lot of people that haven't adopted SD-WAN. I mean, we do in the industry. That's one thing I've found interesting is, we do research and we still find that people are still adopting SD-WAN. So it's where the customer is. There's life cycles on the equipment, the circuits, the ways of working. All of that leads to this long time frame. I mean, it's taken. I've heard two people mention it's taken us 7 years to build out the APIs.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take at least maybe that amount of time for people to adopt the APIs the way they want the enterprises to. And I think it's they're used to consuming things in a cloud environment that way, but it's not the same buyer, right? So that's the difference as well,
right?
And not same user.
So it's not just digging holes that's hard; it's also adopting APIs, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Benjamin, tell me, because you're working with a lot of customers that are looking at this, what are the hurdles? You talked about some of the gains that you've seen with them. What are the hurdles that they're seeing, that the customers are having when they're going towards a NaaS-based offer?
I can see a pattern where customers are successful when moving to a NaaS strategy and implementing this for real. And it always follows the same pattern. It starts with reshaping the cybersecurity strategy. It cannot be decoupled from the network, and customers that should not jump too soon into product adoption with SASE or zero trust. They should make a step back and try to shape their security strategy by answering two questions. The first one is by whom and how am I targeted? So it's all about threat intelligence and knowing more about your adversary. So they need to pick up the right partner, the customer, to collect the data, identify, do the triage and the qualification to get actionable insights, to anticipate more. So that's the first point. But it's not enough to anticipate. Then they need to implement that threat intelligence to their own profile. So that's the second question, which is, where are my weak points? And it's not only about vulnerability management, it's about posture management and how to improve that posture management. So they need to identify their attack surface and maintain that picture over the time. And if you're able to do this, they are going to be able to implement a baseline strategy. I mean, being able to identify the gap between the reality, what is happening as of now, and the past trend. And then once they have done this, they could leverage the threat intelligence, implement this to their own profile to improve their posture, and then they could jump to product adoption and decide whether they should pick SASE, Zero Trust, SAC, or whatever. But this is the pattern I can see.
So if I could paraphrase, are some companies just moving to product adoption or product choice too soon in the process? Is that sort of what you're saying? And Raleigh, I could see you nodding there. Like, is this something that resonates with you? Is this something? Have you been down this path? Is this true?
You can go into any enterprise somewhere, and they have a lot of tools, whether they're well implemented and actually providing the value that led to the decision to buy the tool. That's the question, right? It's easy to consume almost anything. Turning it into value for the business, for the enterprise itself, sometimes is a very long journey. It's just not as easy as we'd like. And so you get churn in people or in leadership, and they prefer one tool over another. And then after a while, if you're not controlling your contracts very well, you suddenly are paying for many times over for the same feature set, or largely same feature set. So, for me, I tell my teams all the time, what value is this to the business, and how quickly can we get to that value? And if we're not ironing out friction for my end users, then we're not doing our jobs, right? So sometimes the right tool is to wait and or do a little more research, talk to peers, come to a place like this, and find out what the real story is for truly adopting a product. Yeah.
It struck me on an earlier panel that one of the speakers had talked about developing metrics. Time to value is a great metric, but taking the time, I guess, to develop metrics before jumping into the product to understand where you're going and what you're so that kind of resonates with that as well. So we have a few minutes left, and of course we can't have a panel without using the letters AI, as I've noticed before. So I would just like to hear maybe from Neal and then Raleigh and then you guys also as well, is whether we have this revolution hitting enterprises, and it's also hitting the network in terms of people aren't sure where these workloads going to reside and what are their performance requirements, or maybe you are sure, maybe you already have seen, you see where you're going, but how is this changing networking, your networking? I've also heard today that high performance networks are the foundation, and a lot of enterprises, they realize that first. I don't know if that's actually true. I would like to hear that from an enterprise, but how is this changing the way you're thinking about networking, the way you're thinking about services?
Yeah, so you made me smile a little bit. I in previous lives, long time ago, used to spend a lot of time doing a lot of engineering for high performance workloads, for like low latency trading and things like that. And largely, I had kind of thought that industry was sort of dead. Like, we've raced to zero, we got there. There's nothing more you can get out of it. And then all of a sudden, this kind of AI thing came along, and now it's all in again, right? So high performance data center network fabrics are having a moment again. Like, it's kind of a big deal. I think I think there's another trend there as well, which is, for the and I think I said this earlier today, that for the last 10 years, a lot of enterprises have been really trying to get their stuff out of their data centers and move to cloud. So that means that those data centers may not have been modernized to the way that they should have been because they were essentially going to be exited, at some point in time. And so now to take in these super high performance compute workloads is almost impossible. Yeah. You just can't feed it enough power and you can't cool it enough. And so I think that's going to create a sort that multi-cloud topology where, yes, I'm going to do things in cloud. Yes, I might do some things at home. And yes, I'm probably going to have to do something in the middle. That's neither of those things. And a lot of that's going to be dictated on, really trying to bring the models and the data closer together. And then how important do I think that data is and how, much do I trust where I'm putting it? Yeah. And so that turns all into a very large networking problem, to provide seamless transport between all of those things. So I think we're really taking multi-cloud and putting it on steroids a little bit, and that will just continue from here.
Wow.
I'm going to echo a small portion of that. I'm also responsible for all our infrastructure, including data integrity, backup, storage, and recovery. I'm also responsible for cybersecurity. And so when I think about AI and models, we act as if, and this is a networking forum, so I get we're talking about moving data, but that data has to live somewhere. And the larger the model, right, the more the data you have, the more predictive and energizing your results may be. But that data in somebody else's cloud, are you sharing any of that with third parties? How well do you know their security? Do they have a SOC 1 or 2? Yeah, are we collecting that info? So I care a lot about the holistic picture of AI. It's very important. You can't be a Luddite and think that this is a fad. It is not. I also came from a high-performance compute background with modeling and simulation for the special effects industry. The problem there is every exponential growth on the compute side meant that your models could get more dense, right? More data, right? The textures we used for Jurassic Park 1 were 100th the size of the textures for Jurassic Park 3. And you're talking in a few years time period, AI is going to have that same exponential effect, right? We're going to reach a limit of what compute and GPUs can do, and then we're going to move that bottleneck, and then the bottleneck's going to be the network, and then it's going to be the storage, and then we're going to rinse and repeat that cycle for a while. Each evolution is going to deliver some groundbreaking, fundamental, society or business moving event or epoch for sure. But you have to be responsible for the whole picture, and that part is a little. That's what keeps me up at night.
I was going to say scary. I was going to put words in your mouth. It sounds scary.
It is scary.
Okay. Well, in the last couple of minutes, I would like, because the topic of the panel is developing an enterprise NaaS strategy. So I would like to just hear some closing words from each of you in terms of, I'm an enterprise and I want to develop a NaaS strategy. What should I be thinking about? Steve, what's your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think the promise of NaaS is simplicity, multiple tools that Raleigh mentioned. You have a observability platform that manages, the various layers, the various distributed nature of networks, and so developing the strategy. I mean, multi-cloud, and we did some surveys with Frost, and the top answer for wanting to implement a NaaS strategy was to help manage their cloud interconnects, and so that's something to consider. And then we asked them what was the top SASE component that you needed, and it was, once again, they said that they talked to us so that there's CASB, but you hear the industry talking a lot more about these zero trust and SD-WAN, but it's really, cloud interconnects, CASB, and security in the cloud is what's top of mind. So I think it's for them, it's to, focus in on those key points and go to the with that in mind, that that's really the way to get them to adopt it. It's simplicity, reducing complexity, adding additional security offerings in their multi-cloud environment, which is only becoming more and more distributed thanks to AI.
Great, what a nice way to tie it all up.
Yeah.
So Benjamin, what about you? What are your sort of recommendations for an enterprise thinking about developing a strategy?
I think the key point that we did not mention yet is the people. I mean, to implement a NaaS strategy and be successful, you need to upgrade the software engineering skills of your people.
Right.
That's the basic. And we faced that challenge within Orange. And 2 years ago, we have launched a quite ambitious plan to train 5,000 people at scale, which used to have a kind of infrastructure background, and upgrade them to turn them into more software developer roles then.
And did that work?
It's ongoing. 3,000 have been trained, and I'm happy to share my feedback on this. But the key point is that program has been sponsored by the CEO herself to get the right traction. And without this, companies and enterprises won't be successful when implementing NaaS strategy.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So often when we have these big transformational projects, we forget the people, right? Who are the ones that are doing it. So that's a really good point. Neal, I could see you nodding there. Do you have, would you say that, or do you have another recommendation for enterprises?
I think I just build on that, because first of all, I think if you have a NaaS strategy, you first need to actually have an enterprise technology strategy, and then figure out how your networking strategy supports that, as opposed to the other way around. I wouldn't want the network engineer saying this is the most important thing and shifting the, a lot of the sort of investment profile of what you're doing in the enterprise. It has to actually follow the other way. Right. And yes, the people have to be a big part of that, and the processes that you have, and then the technology. I think that's all in the consideration.
Right, get it in the right order. And Raleigh, the last word goes to you. What's the?
I couldn't agree more with Neal. Absolutely, right? Then we're an enterprise. I'm not an ISP. I've been an ISP in other lives. It's not this role here. So the network serves a purpose for the business and applications, and for us to take in revenue, and for our knowledge workers to get their job done. So understanding your data and data flows, how much SaaS, software as a service you're consuming, and in what clouds. How much you're likely to leave on-prem, if anything. I think our hybrid strategies worked really well for our business. We actually own our data center. We don't, we have a few colos as well, but primarily our cost of ownership is, a quarter of what it is in the cloud. But that said, the cloud allows us to pivot, try services that I don't have to fully bring on board and whatnot. So understanding how this orchestrated data and data flows work is fundamental to then figuring out where does the network need to be to not just meet that, but where is that likely to shift, so that can I get enough flexibility in my plans, because you don't want to rebuild a network over and over again, in a short life cycle. So thinking about where you may go and what the business may need is also paramount.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your insights, and I'm going to ask you guys to give them a big round of applause in a second, not right now, because we're at the end of our afternoon here, but I just wanted to give you a highlight of what's going on. So there are network and innovation station demonstrations going on outside, so we do encourage you to go and look at those. At 4:30, there's the MEF 3.0 LSO API test and certification program briefing next door. So if you're interested in that, please go and check that out. And at 5:30, the most important thing is it is happy hour. So I do hope to see you all there. And please do give a warm round of applause to the panelists here.